Hi, I'm Paul. I'm a photographer, and I get a lot of questions by new photographers as to what are the first steps to take to start their business. In terms of the setup, the structure of the business. I'm not an attorney and I'm not an accountant, and I'm not qualified to answer that other than the fact that I've done it a few times. My first suggestion, particularly if you live in the United States, is to find your local SCORE office. SCORE, S-C-O-R-E. It stands for the Service Corps of Retired Executives. It doesn't cost you anything, except of course if you pay taxes in the U.S., you already paid for it. It is run by the Small Business Administration. Even if you don't live in the U.S., there are still some services available to you because a lot of their stuff is now online. The first time I went to a SCORE office was, I don't know, somewhere in the early 1990s. A partner and I were setting up an advertising agency. I had been vice president of marketing in the corporate world, and he had been my director of marketing. So we kind of knew a little bit about marketing, but we were always playing with somebody else's money. We didn't have to do all of this ourselves. So we made an appointment. We were very, very lucky in the sense that there was a recently retired advertising agency executive who came to our office. And he only spent maybe 3 hours with us, but he gave us a lot of good information and gave us a list of resources that we could access. Now, in the early 90s, there weren't a lot of things online like there are today, so we tended to need to go into the SCORE office, and on some occasions people came to us. But through him, we connected with a woman who was just about to retire as the CEO of a small regional ad agency. And so she was able to come in and work with our bookkeeper to set up our chart of accounts. And my accounting background was accounting 101 in an evening class at a community college, I don't know, in the 1970s. So anyway, through the help of SCORE, I was able to connect with those people and get our ad agency on the right footing in terms of a lot of best practices, certainly getting the bookkeeping, the paperwork, the taxes, the insurance, getting all of those things all squared away. One of the risks that we take as photographers is we ask other photographers. In fact, a quick story, Becker and I walked into a photographer's loft a couple of years ago, and she was on the telephone, and when she saw us, she just sort of said goodbye to the person and said, oh, there are two photographers just walked in. And so when she hung up, she turned and she asked us a tax question. And I couldn't help but think she'd have been luckier if two accountants had just walked in. So it's okay to ask your colleagues, fellow photographers, people who may be in the same stage of their business as you are. I would suggest, though, that photographers have opinions. Whether they're valid or not could be a different story. I think if you go to a place like SCORE, then you will, and you can search for them on Google. There are local offices in every major city. In fact, I think probably in every county in the United States. And again, if you don't live in the United States, a lot of their resources are available online. So check them out, S-C-O-R-E. Let me just go to accounting for a second. When you find your accountant, or even your bookkeeper, it's really important, particularly from a chart of accounts and a tax standpoint, to work with someone who has previous experience in the creative field. There are differences between what you and I do than a manufacturer. If you take raw materials, produce something, and put it on a store shelf, it's pretty easy to figure out how to tax that. If you take a disc, which you pay less than $1 for, and you charge somebody a couple $1,000s to put images on it and then give them the disc, how much of that is taxable? And how much of that is an hourly wage that you paid yourself to do it? How much of it is the value added to that blank disc So anyway, those are questions that you need to run by somebody who's dealt with photographers, graphic artists, advertising agencies, maybe even public relations firms. Anybody that's had some experience with creatives will have an advantage on the learning curve than somebody who's worked, say, just with manufacturing. So I would highly suggest find an accountant or a bookkeeper who has experience there. I'll jump real quick to contracts. There are a lot of places online to get sample contracts for example, the wedding contract, the wedding agreement. It's kind of like when you tell somebody a story, and they tell it to somebody, and they tell it to somebody, and after 10 people have heard it, somebody comes back and tells it to you, and you don't even realize that was your story to begin with. Things get changed as they get passed on. So you may be copying a contract from somebody who copied it from somebody who copied it, somebody who copied it from somebody. And that's okay, but please take that to your local attorney and have them review it. I don't want to speak for attorneys, but very often they charge a lot less to review something that you've drafted than they charge when you hand them a blank piece of paper and say, this is what I'd like you to do. So what I would suggest is you make a list of the things that you think are important. Copy your contract, write it, edit somebody else's, do whatever you want to do, but then take that to an attorney and have it reviewed. Sometimes just the way you say things. You may be telling people that you require a non-refundable deposit, when in fact you should be saying non-refundable retainer. The attorney can explain the difference and why it's important to say it the right way. Also, when you talk about copyrights, very often clients will say they want the copyright to something. They don't. That's just the word they know to use. What they want is the ability to make prints or use it on Facebook. So what you're talking about is some sort of a usage license as opposed to actually transferring the copyright. Because once you transfer the copyright, you don't own the images anymore, and they can do anything they want. So if that's not your the intended result, then you're probably better off with some sort of a limited license. Again, talk to an attorney, not a photographer. All right, well that's all we're going to talk about today, and maybe I'll make up some other stuff and make another video. All right, thanks for your time. Ciao.